Well, hi, good morning. Today I'm going to teach you how to control stress with your feet. This is a stress management technique that humans have been using since they first walked the earth. I have been using this ever since my doctor instructed me to, which was a few years back due to an illness of 25 years that went misdiagnosed. And as you can imagine, that wreaked havoc and caused all kinds of side effects and a lot of stress on my mind, body, and spiritual self. So I was pretty much a stress mess. And as told, I started practicing this technique every single day. It was so profound that my typical healthcare science self decided to dive in deep every day for 2 years, studying, practicing, and exploring all the avenues that I could advance and use this technique in my everyday daily routine, which I now continue to use today and also teach my clients. Wonderful thing, it's pretty effortless, cost effective, and delivers a huge impact, which is what we want when we're managing our health, right? With that said, welcome, I'm Gia. This is my channel, Soul Science. This is where we get to learn and discuss all tools, techniques, and methods related to emotional and stress management due to illnesses, injuries, and traumas that wreak havoc all over your life. I'm going to head inside, grab a cup of tea, and get started. I have some great things to show and teach you today. So if you're ready, let's head on in. Okay, I have my tea ready to go. We're going to talk about how to manage stress overload from external factors that we encounter every day that makes it very, very difficult for our bodies to combat and deal with because we have lots of different stressors. And when we're not coping well and it becomes chronic, we then start usually exhibiting symptoms that we're complaining about. Probably because what's going on inside physiologically has now taken over, has been trying to deal with detoxifying the results or the byproducts of the stress that are occurring in the body, and it's too overloaded and overtaxed and doesn't have enough supply to meet the stress demands that are coming inside you. And that is stress overload. Another way of saying it is there's a reaction that occurs inside the body called oxidative stress. The byproducts I'm referring to are called free radicals. Free radicals are oxygen molecules that carry unpaired electrons. They need to pair to an electron in order to be processed, neutralized, and detoxed out of the body. They specifically need to pair to negative electrons. That's a lot of information. Let me break it down to normal everyday language about how the heck you're going to manage your stress. So you go out into the world and you have your normal day and you have your stressors that come at you and you're not able to handle them and your anxiety is taking off, or you're about on 3 hours of sleep because you're waking up at all hours with your mind racing, jacked up to the high heavens. Things have gone to a level where you're a mess, you know it, and despite every effort you take, you cannot mindset your way over this. There is no mind over matter. That's a pretty good indication that what's going on inside is physiological, that you're overloaded with all kinds of stressors. There may be ones that you're overloaded with every day out of your control that you're not aware of that are causing massive oxidative stress in your body and kicking off all these little free radicals, and they're floating around trying to pair themselves with electrons that you don't have enough of because you are not prepared as a human being to fight off all these free radicals. It turns out there's a way that you can get more of them, and it's a way that you can also mitigate what's causing the free radicals. How do we know it's gone to this physiological state and that a lot of this is oxidative stress? There's markers for this. In health science, we measure things. If you're not sleeping and you're stressed and you're waking up, or you're having trouble falling asleep and you're wired and you're tired, there is something that has to do with this whole stress response called cortisol. Cortisol kicks out of your adrenal glands, when you have to deal with any sort of stress. When it starts to interrupt your normal circadian rhythms, it's probably a good chance that cortisol's kicking out when you're supposed to be resting, not running or fighting or working or exercising. The way that they do that is they run a 24-hour cortisol test, and professionals, healthcare professionals, can order those labs and look at it. And if your cortisol is spiking at 3 a.m. when that's normally when you're supposed to be sleeping, and you're waking up in a state of huge anxiety and jacked up, it's because your cortisol levels have spiked and your body's getting ready to get your ass up and get doing something. So it's kind of physiologically impossible for you to do breath techniques and chant Om and do all these stress relaxation things. And it's really pretty cruel if you start beating yourself up about it that you can't calm the heck down, because really your system's taken off. And it's probably doing that because it's a result of free radicals that it's not handling on top of everything else. The other way we measure stress responses to figure out if somebody's in chronic stress that they're not handling is we look at inflammatory markers, because there's a huge correlation between chronic stress and inflammation. When stress goes up, inflammation goes up, or inflammation goes up causing stress, right? They're physiological responses, and when they become chronic, the two go hand in hand, because a lot of times when things are chronic, there's chronic issues in there, meaning there's a whole buildup of oxidative stress in these free radicals. And free radicals are known in science to lead to problems with tissue damage, DNA, illnesses, injuries that aren't healing, all kinds of stuff. And when that occurs, the body goes into an inflammatory state. So we measure a CRP, which is a reactive protein level. You draw it from your blood, and it's an indicator that the body is in systemic inflammation. Another way we look at things is through the main systems that deal with responding and reacting and sending messages throughout our body to our muscles, our organs, our bones, and such. And that's our electrical systems. Our brain, our spinal cord, basically our nervous system, and our cardiac system. Those guys are electrical, right? We're made mostly of water, and water conducts electricity quite nicely, and that works through our arteries and veins and also through our nervous system. And we send electrical impulses to and from the brain and the heart throughout the body in response to resting and digesting, or ramping up and doing work and responding to stress. So we take electrodes and we stick them on our head, we stick them on our heart, we stick them over our muscles, and we measure the frequencies or the electricity that's emitted out, and it kicks it out in patterns that we see, like those heart rhythms and brain waves, and the same with muscle tension. We can see all of that based on the electrical activity that converts over to a graph that you stare at, and you can find out if the person's in anxiety, if there's muscle tension present, if there's areas of the brain that are heightened in times that they shouldn't be. So how do we manage it for ourselves before we have to go and get all these tests and go down this route? And we know we're getting into states that we can no longer control. First thing is, how do we deal with free radicals? Well, there are some things that we know of that cause this oxidative stress response and produce too many free radicals that we cannot pair electrons to neutralize and detoxify. And those things occur in the environment, and now in modern day living, they occur every day, everywhere, and they're not going away. So we need to either understand how to mitigate them and work with them, or go off grid and live in the woods. Most of us are not going to go off grid. So what do we need to do? We need to figure out what are these things that really are heavy hitters and have a huge impact on taking up all of our stress resources, so we can keep them for ourselves to deal with the other stress in our lives in a very healthy way. Heavy hitter is EMFs, electrical magnetic fields, also known as radiation, which we know comes from cell phones and computers, lighting, anything electrical, outlets and wires in the wall, How do we mitigate them? Well, again, we're not going to go off grid. Okay, so what do we need to do then to arm ourselves with more, I guess, electrons, right? To pair up and deal with the free radicals that they're producing. And we know in science that radiation does tissue damage, DNA damage. We know that free radicals lead to chronic inflammation, illness, all sorts of problems. And some of the areas that these lovelies attack are the electrical systems, which is the brain and heart. And they go at that stuff pretty hard. What do we got to do? Well, turns out there is a free limitless supply of these negative electrons that we can go and get and soak up in our bodies and mitigate the responses of these EMFs. And it turns out that they come from the earth. And geoscientists and a lot of scientists believe we have a limitless supply, and it has to do with electrical activity through lightning and how much it hits and how often it hits in the earth. And I'm not going to get into it. I will give you resources if you want to dive into it, but just know that science has now researched and proven that we can access these from the earth. In doing so, we can keep our stress managed. Well, why aren't we? And why aren't we talking about this? Well, again, it's modern day, and a long time ago, before modern day, turns out that we just access these things normally. And the reason being is because we, just like when you plug something into the wall, into a socket, to turn on a light, it grounds to the earth. Right? So it's accessing the same things. It's grounding to the earth and you're getting electricity. Well, it turns out we ground to the earth too. And we also get a form of electricity. We get the bioelectrical activity, which is negative electrons from the earth. How do we ground? We ground with our feet. What's really cool is anatomically where all of our nerve endings go, the most nerve endings, like 1,000 plus or something crazy, are in our feet. So they're like the little plugs. So we're a wire and our nerve endings are the little plugs in our feet. And when we take our feet and we put them on the ground, we now essentially plug into the earth and ground, and we soak these up. Problem is we wear shoes every day, and shoes have rubber soles on them, and that doesn't conduct electricity, which is why we're not soaking up these electrons. And then we're inside all day long, and the houses are not grounded, and the beds we sleep on are not grounded, and we usually pop the beds against the wall, and our desk against the wall, and our chairs against the wall, and our heads against the wall. And what's against the wall is all the wiring. What's the wiring emit? The EMF waves. Now, it doesn't kick it out across the world. It comes out a foot or two. A couple things here that we can do. Really easy to get ourselves grounded and soak up these little electrons and deal with these EMF waves so that we can free ourselves up to actually have what we need in our bodies to handle other stressors. Move the bed away from the wall, move your head away, move your chairs and stuff like a foot or two out, for starters. Second, get on the ground in your bare feet. Walk, garden, talk to friends, do yoga, meditate, sit down. I don't know. If you're in a wheelchair, you go outside, somebody brings you outside, move the foot plates and get your feet on the ground. If you're not in a position to do that all day, every day, you're going to have to tackle the issues inside. So it turns out that when people ground, and that they proved through what grounding does pretty quickly, everywhere from instantly to throughout days, it will start to provide a neutralized effect in your body, so much so that cortisol levels go back to how they need to be. They start to normalize. Inflammatory markers go down. All the things we talked about, how you measure the electrical activity in the brain waves, the areas that indicate that you're stressed, that activity starts to go down. And it allows for activity to increase in other parts of the brain for you to have REM sleep, creativity, meditation, rest and digest states. The same with the heart. We measure the heart waves, the heart rate variability. That's an indicator of if people are in stress or not. That starts to become and show very, very positive rhythms very quickly. So our hormones are balancing. Our electrical responses are balancing. CRP starts to come down, and consequently what you're hearing from the people who are doing these techniques are reporting, I'm sleeping better, I have less pain, I'm able to move and groove and not feel like holy hell and nothing throbs and hurts all the time. My back and my neck that's constantly uncomfortable is going away. My headaches are resolving. My anxiety is better. I can manage my stress more. I'm not a mess every single day, and I'm coping with what goes on from a day-to-day basis. I smile more. I'm happier. All this data started coming out, and so as they researched the effects, they also figured out that, like getting on the ground in your bare feet or with your skin in your body and making contact with the earth, feet's most effective, but like you can sit down, get your arms on the ground, what have you. While that's also really super positive and you can get the same effects indoors using materials or products that have these little like copper coils, patented products in them that allow you to plug the product into a socket and just like a light ground to the earth. And then when you put your feet on it or you make contact with your body, you start to be able to get into that grounded, neutralized state. The way that they prove all this is obviously they hook you up to all the science stuff and do all the measuring, but they're also measuring the voltage and the effects of the EMF waves, which frankly, you could get one of those devices at Home Depot or Lowe's and measure all your stuff and measure all the activity and voltage on yourself and then ground yourself and see if it goes down extremely low or to nothing. There's a couple other things that you can do. So cheap and easy, bare feet, move some things away from the wall. That's a good start. But you're still going to have, Wi-Fi, computers, all this stuff going on, and you're probably not outside all day long. A couple things that you can do. Inside, you can use a mat, just like this. It's a grounding mat. I put it under my feet when I work and if I'm just reading or doing yoga or meditating or Pilates. I will plug this bad boy in. So very easy. Take this, clip the cord on. The cord plugs in to this little fancy dancy 3-pronger, and this goes into the socket in the wall. And you just want to make sure that the plug or the socket is grounded, and the way that you know that is these products come with a little device. You can also get this at like a Home Depot, where it's just this little plug that lights up and it's got stickers on it, and it tells you when you plug it into the socket if it's a grounded socket or not. It'll light up and it'll say 2 lights, grounded, and if it's anything else, not grounded. Chances are most of the sockets are grounded, but you still want to double check so you're not doing this and not getting the results. And these cords are great. They're super long. They've got long coil on them, and then they're really, really long to begin with, so they'll go across a huge room. But you probably have multiple sockets and plugs everywhere, so rock on, you'll be able to plug this in. If you want a bigger mat, there's bigger mats to do exercise in and sprawl out on for your yoga, meditation, Pilates. These work just great as well. And then the other area that I especially get a lot of bang for my buck is at night, because we sleep a lot of hours and I want to be in a neutral situation. I do not want to have myself exposing to or having to fight off free radicals, and I want to keep my cortisol levels the way that they need to be, because I had to do a lot of work to get them there. So I use a bed mat. And there's sheets, there's bed mats, and they're not rubbery like this. They're easy, you don't really feel them. They're great, same setup. You check the socket, plug it into the wall, hook it up, get grounded, you're good to go. So lastly, you want to measure your results. You want to know that what you're doing is having an effect. And the easiest way to do this is a 0 to 10 scale. It's a reliable, valid way. So stress, 0, no stress, 10 out of 10. Off the chart stress. 0, no anxiety, 10 out of 10. Have to make a phone call, can't cope another second, anxiety. Pain, 0, no pain, 10 out of 10, the worst pain ever. And you get the gig. So if you do this every day and you just note that and you note what you're doing for grounding and how long you're doing it, it's going to help you determine if you need to ground more often to get effects because you're only doing it an hour a day, or if it's working in some areas, but you're still noticing a problem in another, great. That is wonderful information that you can now take to your healers and healthcare providers to tell them that this specific thing is not being managed and it's still an issue. And that is going to help people narrow in on what they need to do to help you out. I know when patients or clients come to me with measurable data, it gives me a clue real quick on what isn't the issue and what may be the issue, if I can help them, if other people need to help them, if I need to refer them out, what I need to test for, because somebody can have stress and manage that, but then they might have pain that's not going away, and that's because there's an injury there, or there's something we have to check for, God forbid, a tumor, etc. Not to be scary, but sometimes things can go missed when you have a lot of different things going on, especially when you're talking about stress and anxiety and emotions. It can cloud some of the other things. So the better you can manage this stuff by mitigating the things in the world that are coming at you every day, causing responses in your system that you can't cope with, the better you can arm yourself to do that, the better you can either clean all that up completely or spotlight on the areas where there really truly is something that needs to be addressed by a professional. I am going to include a resource book down below that you can check out that holds a lot of cool information about how the earth works, how this came to be, grounding as a technique, and then all the research studies. It's got the abstracts in them, just real quick what it was when it was done and what the results were, for those of you who are interested. And if you want the actual research itself, you can use this book to then look up those titles on PubMed, and I will put in any additional resource links for the different products that I discussed. And just a quick note about the rating scale from 0 to 10, so you don't forget about that. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments below. If you think anybody will benefit from this, please go ahead and share it. And of course, if you like this video, give me the thumbs up. Next video, we will talk about a completely different approach to managing some stress. Until then, stay grounded, stay healthy, stay stress-free.